So I'm gonna need to see some identification.
Well, why am I being questioned? What's the reason for the stop?
Just making sure everything's good out here. Go ahead and hand me your ID.
I'm not required to show it. I'm outside my rental, not doing anything wrong.
Brother, you can make this easy or you can make it hard. Your call.
The sun was barely awake when the trouble began. The sky was pale orange, the ocean calm, and the beach completely empty. A single black man sat in a plastic chair outside a small beach hut, holding a cup of coffee with both hands, staring at the waves like he had done many times before. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't sneaking. He wasn't bothering anyone. But from the moment the patrol car slowed down in the parking lot, his quiet morning was already over. Before I continue, where are you watching from right now? And if this is your first time here, please subscribe. This story gets heavy, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The man sitting outside the hut was named Evan Cole. He wore a faded gray t-shirt, dark pants, and old sneakers dusted with sand. No badge. No uniform. Just a man on his day off. He had driven 4 long hours through the night to reach this beach, a place tied to his childhood. A place where his mind could finally rest. He rented the hut for the weekend using his own name, paid in full, checked in the night before, and slept with the windows open so he could hear the ocean. Evan Cole was not an ordinary man, though nothing about him would tell you that. He was a commander in the United States Secret Service, trusted with protecting national leaders and managing operations that most people would never hear about. His days were filled with threat briefings, security routes, and decisions that carried real consequences. For 3 straight months, he had barely slept. This weekend was supposed to be quiet. Just coffee, waves, and silence. The patrol car that pulled in belonged to Officer Nathan Wolf. Wolf had been on the force for 6 years. Not new, but not seasoned either. He spotted Evan the moment he passed the parking entrance. A black man. Alone. Sitting outside one of the beach huts. Wolf slowed down, then stopped. He didn't see a crime. He didn't get a call. Nothing was reported. But something about the scene bothered him enough to act. He radioed his location, turned on his body camera, opened the door. The camera began recording. From the angle on Wolf's chest, the footage showed an empty beach, clean sand, wooden huts lined up evenly, and one man sitting calmly with a coffee cup. Wolf stepped onto the sand, his hand resting close to his belt. Each step brought him closer, and with each step, Evan noticed everything. The car, the walk, the posture. Evan had been trained for years to read movement, to sense intent. He had clocked Wolf the second the engine idled. Wolf stopped a few feet away. He cleared his throat. Evan looked up slowly, calm, alert, controlled. Wolf asked what Evan was doing there. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It was sharp. Suspicious. Like Evan had been caught somewhere he didn't belong. Evan answered simply. He said he was drinking coffee and watching the ocean. That should have been the end of it. But Wolf didn't leave. He looked past Evan at the hut, then back at Evan. He asked if Evan was staying there. Evan said yes. Wolf asked how long. Evan said the weekend. Wolf asked if he had proof that he rented it. That was the moment Evan felt the shift. This wasn't a safety check. This wasn't routine. There was no broken lock. No noise complaint. No reason to be here. Evan had seen this pattern before, just not pointed at him while he was off duty. He asked Wolf why he was being questioned. Wolf gave a vague answer. Said he was just making sure everything was okay. But his body said something else. His stance was stiff. His eyes searched Evan's face, his hands, and the space around him. Evan was sitting still, doing nothing, yet being treated like a problem that needed solving. The questions kept coming. Where did you come from? Are you here alone? What do you do for work? Is this your first time at these huts? Each one felt heavier than the last. Evan answered without raising his voice, but inside, His patience was thinning. He knew the law. He enforced it at a level far above this beach. He also knew he was being tested. Then Wolf asked for identification. That crossed the line. Evan told him, calmly and clearly, that he was not required to provide ID. He said he wasn't suspected of a crime. He wasn't detained. He was sitting outside his rental. Wolf didn't like that. His tone hardened. He said it would be easier if Evan just cooperated. That word sat heavy in the air. Cooperate. Like Evan was the problem. Like knowing his rights made him difficult. Evan asked a direct question. Was he being detained? Wolf didn't answer it directly. He repeated the request for ID. Evan stayed seated. His back straightened. His voice stayed even. He said he had done nothing wrong and asked again why this interaction was happening. Wolf said Evan's refusal made him more suspicious. That sentence mattered. The body camera caught it clearly. Suspicious for sitting. Suspicious for drinking coffee. Suspicious for saying no. The air between them tightened. The ocean kept moving, slow and steady, while everything else felt stuck. Evan noticed Wolf glance at the camera, then at his radio. Evan also noticed the time. He was tracking everything now. Names. Movements. Words. Wolf called for backup. He described Evan as uncooperative. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just uncooperative. Evan knew what that meant. He had seen where that road led for people who looked like him and had far less protection. He told Wolf he was making a mistake. Not a threat. Just a statement. Wolf didn't hear the difference. They waited. Minutes passed. Evan's coffee went cold in his hands. Another patrol car pulled in. This time, the officer stepping out was Leonard Graves, a veteran with decades on the job. He walked up slowly, took in the scene, and then focused on Evan's face. His expression changed immediately. Recognition hit him hard. Graves looked at Wolf and asked if he knew who he was dealing with. Wolf said no. Graves told him. Right there on the sand. Commander Evan Cole, United States Secret Service. The color drained from Wolf's face. Graves apologized quickly, tried to smooth things over, called it a misunderstanding. Evan stood up slowly, set his coffee down, and said this was not a misunderstanding. He said the only reason this stopped was because someone recognized him. If that hadn't happened, it would have gone further. The camera recorded every word. Evan asked Wolf for his badge number. Wolf hesitated. Evan waited. The number came out shaky. Evan wrote it down. Then he said something quiet but final. He told Wolf that the footage from that camera needed to stay exactly as it was. No gaps. No errors. No accidents. Because this wasn't over. Evan walked back into the hut and closed the door. Behind him, the consequences had already started. Inside the beach hut, the quiet Evan Cole had driven 4 hours for it was gone. The door was closed, but the tension followed him in like heat. He stood still for a moment, listening to the ocean through the thin wooden walls, letting his breathing settle. His coffee sat untouched on the small table. He didn't sit back down. His mind was already working. Outside, Officer Nathan Wolf and Officer Leonard Graves spoke in low voices. Their words were muffled, but their body language said enough. Wolf paced. Graves stood firm, arms crossed, clearly upset. The body camera was still running. That camera didn't care about embarrassment, rank, or regret. It captured truth without emotion. Evan pulled out his phone. The first call went to his supervisor. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't add drama. He stated facts. Time. Location. Officer name. Badge number. Reason given. Lack of legal cause. Body cam active. The response on the other end was immediate and serious. Evan was told to document everything and forward details as soon as possible. The second call was to a civil rights attorney he had known for years. Not a favor call, a professional one. Evan explained what happened, step by step. The attorney asked one question that mattered most. Was it recorded? Evan said yes. That was all the attorney needed to hear. Outside, Wolf finally got back into his patrol car. His movements were rushed. He didn't look at the HUD again. He drove away with the camera still attached to his chest, still recording the beach, the sand, and the place where his career had just cracked. Graves lingered a moment longer. He looked at the hut like he wanted to apologize again, but didn't. Then he left too. The beach returned to silence. But the silence was temporary. Within 48 hours, a formal request was filed for the body camera footage. Not informal. Not internal. Official. The department had no choice but to preserve it. Any tampering would make things worse. Everyone involved knew that. When the footage was reviewed, it was worse than Evan remembered. The questions had no legal foundation. The tone was clear. The repeated pressure, the refusal to explain the stop. The moment Wolf said Evan became suspicious simply for not giving ID. That sentence stood out. It was replayed again and again. Training officers paused on it. Legal advisors rewound it. There was no way to defend it. The local department tried to get ahead of the story. Wolf was placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation began. A standard move, but this time it didn't calm anything. Because this wasn't Wolf's first complaint. Records surfaced. 3 previous stops. Different people. Same pattern. No crime. Long questioning. Requests for ID without cause. Each time, the complaint went nowhere. No footage before. No pressure. No one pushed back hard enough. Until now. The news broke a week later. A Secret Service commander harassed while on vacation. The video aired with Evan's face blurred, but the audio untouched. People heard the questions, heard the tone, heard the shift when Graves arrived. They heard the moment power changed hands, not because the law suddenly mattered, but because identity was revealed. Public reaction was immediate. Anger, disbelief, exhaustion. The department released a statement saying Wolf was checking on suspicious activity. That sentence didn't survive long. Legal experts tore it apart. Sitting and drinking coffee wasn't suspicious. Renting a hut wasn't suspicious. Saying no wasn't suspicious. The footage didn't support the claim. The internal investigation moved fast. Wolf was interviewed. He said he felt something was off. He said Evan's refusal raised concerns. He said he was trained to trust his instincts. That didn't help him. Instinct isn't law. Training isn't a feeling. The investigators compared Wolf's actions to department policy line by line. He failed early and often. No reasonable suspicion. No lawful detention. No cause for ID. Calling backup escalated a non-event into a confrontation. Evan was interviewed next. He stayed calm. He stayed factual. He didn't insult Wolf. He didn't guess at motives. He spoke about impact, about patterns, about how easily that moment could have turned dangerous for someone without his position or knowledge. That part mattered. The lawsuit was filed in federal court soon after. It named Wolf. It named the department. It named the city. The claims were clear. Civil rights violation, unlawful detention, failure to supervise. The city's legal team reviewed the footage privately. Then they stopped smiling. There was talk of settlement early, but Evan refused to rush. Money wasn't the goal. Change was. He wanted accountability on record. He wanted policy reviewed. He wanted training rewritten. He wanted Wolf's behavior acknowledged for what it was. 6 weeks into the investigation, the decision came down. Wolf violated policy. Multiple times. Termination was recommended. When Wolf was called in and told, he argued. He said he was just doing his job. He said he didn't mean harm. He said everything would have been fine if Evan had just shown ID. That was when the union stopped backing him. The footage made defense impossible. Wolf was fired 11 weeks after that quiet morning at the beach. The lawsuit didn't stop. As discovery continued, emails surfaced. Training gaps were exposed. Supervisors admitted complaints hadn't been followed up properly. The city realized this case wasn't just about one officer anymore. Settlement talks resumed. This time, terms were broader. Mandatory retraining for every officer. Clear rules on stops and questioning. Monthly audits of body camera footage. Independent review of bias complaints. Public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The agreement was reached quietly. The amount wasn't disclosed, but legal analysts estimated it was significant. Part of that money went to organizations that help people fight similar abuse without resources or connections. Evan gave one interview. Just one. His face stayed partly hidden. His voice stayed steady. He said he didn't want revenge. He wanted proof that what happened wasn't okay. He wanted officers to understand that calm abuse was still abuse. That polite words could still cause harm. The interviewer asked if he believed Wolf was racist. Evan paused. Then he said actions matter more than labels, and Wolf's actions showed bias, whether he admitted it or not. The footage kept circulating. Police academies requested it. Law schools studied it. Trainers paused at key moments. The approach, the ID request, the backup call. Each one became a lesson in what not to do. The beach hut became a symbol. Not because of the building, but because of what happened there. And even Cole never went back. Not because he was afraid. Because that place no longer belonged to quiet. Months passed, but the morning at the beach hut never left even Cole's mind. The small wooden hut, the chair, the cold coffee, it was all burned into his memory. What began as a weekend escape had turned into a full-scale reckoning. But Evan didn't rush. He knew the system could take time. He knew the truth carried its own weight, and he had evidence that wouldn't lie. Wolf's body camera. Every step, every question, every tense second was recorded. That footage was more powerful than any argument, more permanent than any word of apology. The police department worked frantically behind the scenes. Officers whispered about the incident. Supervisors tried to explain it away, but the facts were undeniable. Wolf's repeated lack of legal grounds, the aggressive questioning, the insistence on ID without cause, it was all on video. There was no way to spin it. Wolf's career was over before he even realized it. The settlement terms began to take shape. The city agreed to retraining for all officers, revising stop and question policies, and introducing oversight for body camera footage. But Evan wasn't done. The impact had to reach beyond him. He wanted this to become a lesson, a warning, a case study for the police across the country. One man sitting quietly should never trigger suspicions solely because of skin color. Meanwhile, Wolf's life had already changed. Administrative leave became permanent unemployment. His appeals failed. The union couldn't fight the footage. The body cam, the very tool he trusted, had become his undoing. He became a cautionary tale for other officers. Instinct and assumption are no defense against accountability. For Evan, the process was deliberate and exacting. He returned to the hut several times, but he never stayed long. He spoke with his attorney, ensuring every legal step was airtight. Calls were made to superiors, confirming his actions, ensuring his rights were protected. The lawyer coordinated with civil rights groups to ensure the case had both legal and social weight. Evan understood that one man's experience could influence hundreds of others, potentially saving them from harassment. The internal investigation report was released. Wolf had acted inconsistent with department policies and community standards. The review detailed his improper questioning, unnecessary escalation, and failure to recognize lawful rights. The public statement was precise, leaving no room for debate. The department also acknowledged prior complaints against Wolf, showing a pattern of behavior that went unchecked until Avon intervened. The national news cycle caught wind of the story. While Avon's face remained partially obscured for security reasons, the audio of Wolf's questions and threats was played publicly. People were stunned. Outrage grew. Communities debated the limits of authority, racial bias, and civil rights. The story spread fast because it was simple and undeniable. A man exercising his rights was harassed, recorded it, and held the system accountable. Throughout the legal proceedings, Avon stayed calm. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to exaggerate. Every word he had spoken that morning was backed by the footage. Every accusation he had made could be proven with timestamps, questions, and Wolf's own voice. When lawyers argued over motions and evidence, Avon simply verified what happened. His presence, his statements, and his documentation created a chain impossible to dispute. The case became an important reference point. Law schools analyzed it for lessons on civil rights enforcement. Police academies used the video to teach recruits the difference between legal authority and abuse of power. The body camera footage became a permanent training tool. Trainees were instructed to pause, watch, and reflect. Would this be acceptable? Could this happen to someone else? Could this happen to you? Avon's story also became personal for many who followed it. His calm, factual approach in the face of harassment showed that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, courage is quiet, methodical, and unwavering. The public learned that harassment is not always loud or violent. It can be polite, systematic, and professional, yet still profoundly damaging. By the time the settlement was finalized 18 months after that morning, the changes were tangible. Wolf's termination was upheld. Retraining programs were implemented. Policies were revised. Independent oversight of stops and body camera footage became mandatory. The city accepted responsibility. Avon, though initially seeking justice, ensured that the outcome was structural, not just personal. For Avon, life eventually returned to his routine. He resumed duties with the Secret Service, his professional reputation intact. But he had a new perspective. The world outside protection details could be just as threatening in its own way. The experience strengthened his commitment to civil rights and accountability. The beach hut, now a quiet vacation rental, became an unlikely landmark. People who stayed there sometimes asked about the story. The owner would recount it briefly. A man was harassed there once, but he made sure justice was served. It was a lesson more than a scandal. A story of accountability. A record of why procedures exist, why rights matter, why footage can't be ignored. Even years later, when asked if he regretted how the morning unfolded, Avon said no. He regretted the harassment itself. He regretted that assumptions and bias had caused disruption. But he did not regret standing his ground. He did not regret making the world recognize the mistake. Wolf vanished from public view, a cautionary tale of authority misused. He reportedly tried to relocate and seek employment elsewhere, but the body cam footage followed him. Every time he applied, he faced the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, Avon's example endured. Trainers, students, and future officers reviewed the footage for years. Each replay reminded them that authority is conditional, that privilege is temporary, and that accountability is permanent. The case also influenced policy beyond that city. Other departments examined their stop and question procedures, training, and supervision policies. Wolf's firing and the legal settlement became a reference in broader discussions on qualified immunity, bias in law enforcement, and civil rights protections. Even Cole never returned to that exact hut. He found other quiet spots for rare breaks, places where his privacy could be maintained. But the beach, the waves, the small wooden hut, those remained in his memory as a moment of clarity, proof that right actions matter, that recordings don't lie, and that courage can be both quiet and relentless. In the end, it wasn't about money or revenge. It was about truth. The body camera that Wolf had trusted to record someone else's compliance ended up holding him accountable. Every frame mattered. Every second was proof. And justice, slow but undeniable, was served. The beach hut still stands today. Visitors often ask about its history. Those who know the story understand its weight. Evan Cole's fight showed that even in small, peaceful moments, the world can demand vigilance. And when someone stands firm, evidence can change everything. If you followed this story, remember this. Accountability matters, rights matter, and sometimes being calm and documenting the truth is the strongest action you can take. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss stories like this, because real-life lessons are often stranger and more important than fiction.